Thanks, guys. And thanks for the introduction. We didn't hear most of it because we were in the hallway, but hopefully we were introduced as interesting people that will entertain you for the next hour. My name is Shane Toddhunter. I'm the Vice President Business Development with 14 Oranges Software, and this is my friend Suzanne. He'll introduce himself in a sec. 14 Oranges is a software development company. We specialize in app development and end-to-end solutions from web, database, API, that sort of thing. It was created by our CEO, Sylvain Marcotte, in 2009. The company, he was working for a big company downtown, and he saw a vacuum in the iOS development space in Vancouver. So he went to a course, actually not unlike this, at BCIT. He learned how to do iOS evenings and weekends, and just sort of put the word out there that he could do iOS development. Right away, he had clients instantly, and very big clients actually came up right away, and he was able to quit his full-time job and started it in his basement, and as many startups happen in the basement, as we all know. He was able to hire some really senior engineers that he built relationships with over the years by offering them some of the flexibility that they weren't getting at some of the companies they were working at. One of the first customers that they landed that really was sort of the linchpin of 14 Oranges taking off was a company called Eris. To give you scope on Eris, this is a big company. If you haven't heard of them, they own Motorola. So we've all heard of Motorola. Eris is a huge company, and they were needing to outsource some of the mobile engineering stuff, and we still work with Eris today. 14 Oranges realized that an app almost never, I'm sure all of you guys know, it's almost never just on the phone. There's something else happening. It's connecting to some data sources. It's pulling data in. There's a database, an admin panel on a website somewhere. And he was outsourcing all that work to a company called Delta Business Services, which was my company. It was a web development company that I started in my basement in 2000. 14 Oranges quickly realized we were their biggest cost, and at Delta Biz, I realized they were my biggest customer. So we had some conversations, and eventually 14 Oranges acquired Delta Business Services and brought me on board as a business development guy. From there, 14 Oranges has been growing year on year, 100% revenue increases for first 5 straight years, and slightly under that last year. Our team's been growing, and we're picking up new and really interesting clients. Eris is a great one. To example, the BC Safety Authority. When you see those guys that come to your house to do the electrical inspections, the app that they're running on their phone, on their iPad, we built that. Shaw, if you have Shaw TV at home and you're managing your PVR, our engineers built that. I think Suzanne has worked on that one quite a bit. Speaking of Suzanne, I'm going to pass the mic over to him and he can introduce himself.
Thank you, Shane. Actually, you know, he kind of stumbled on my name and says if he doesn't even know me, but we actually know each other for quite a while. So Shane pretty much took all my talking points, so I don't have much to say. But we just want to make clear that if anytime you have any questions or anything like that, don't even bother putting up your hand because it's degrading. Just shout it out. We'll hear you and we'll take your question. Before we do anything, Kirsten, she was supposed to do some controlling of the computer, but she's kind of just retired from that responsibility, so it's on us now. Thank you, Kirsten. Oh my God, okay, so that's Shane at maybe 13 years old, I think. How old are you there? 16, oh, okay, that's not helping your case, but that's high school pictures. We put that in because it's embarrassing, and Kirsten's idea. And she got out of it. She was supposed to put one on there, but she didn't, so. Anyway, my name is Suzanne. I am a graduate of SFU and BCIT. I went the schooling route. I went the long, expensive route where you pay a lot of money and you hope for something out of it, which I really didn't get. But I've been working, it was electrical engineering that I studied, but now I'm working as a software engineer because I think that area really appealed to me more, and taking electrical really didn't limit me in that aspect. So that's how I ended up working as a software engineer with Shane and the rest of the 14 Oranges. And there aren't really actually 14 of us, there's a whole bunch, so it's kind of misleading. But things I do, I mean, did you talk about Rotary, like what you do? Okay, well, I don't do any of that. I just like to stay, sports, fitness, reading, internet. What do I do every day? Depends. Some days nothing, some days a lot. Like today, we did nothing, except come here, and this was nice. But you know, it differs every day. For instance, some days are just completely development all day. Other days could be sitting down with a customer and discussing business specifications, taking those and translating those into a document that you can reference and sort of negotiate on to create a purchase order or a software agreement. Yeah, I think that's basically it. And then we have a lot of fun. We have foosball, ping pong, all that stuff, like the typical stuff. Here, I'll give it back to you.
Thanks. So I'll just tell you a little bit about my background. So I introduced the company that I worked with that I started was Delta Business Services. But before that, right after the day I graduated from high school, I left and I joined the military, did the military college route. Very quickly realized that wasn't for me. I shouldn't say very quickly. I was in the military for 4.5 years, and then I left, and I started random weird jobs, ended up teaching myself how to be a web developer. It was the .com days, and I worked at a .com company. And this is an interesting story, just to keep your eyes open and you get in with a new company as to where the roles could start. I started photocopying at this .com company. I had no background, no computer science, but I started talking to the devs a lot because their stuff that they were doing was really cool. And ended up working my way and helping with some of the front-end stuff, and got into some sales and general management in the .com days, and that company was a stock play and failed, and I left. What I did is took a few of the customers that we had at the time, and that's how I started Delta Biz. I taught myself how to build websites back in the days when the old HTML days where you could make things flash, and that was about it. And I took some of those clients, built a business over the years, and taught myself how to web develop. It's very different, like I said, than Suzanne. He went through school, did the methodical approach, and I taught myself and built a business around what I was doing at the same time, and yet we ended up in the same place, and we'll talk a little bit more about that stuff a little bit later on. Some of the stuff that I do on my off time, I'm actually pretty used to speaking into a microphone these days because I'm a president of a Rotary Club in Tawasin. What I found, I worked from home for 10 years, and it gets lonely. It gets boring, and there's a lot of stuff we'll talk about later about ways to work around that. One of the ways I found was get out in the community and get involved. Rotary was a great way for me to do that. I've been in Rotary for about 5 years now, and so now I was nervous to speak in front of a group a couple years ago, and after a few years of speaking in a mic every week, I'm getting a lot more comfortable at it. So some of the things we're going to talk about today we've alluded to. We're going to just, first of all, if anyone has questions, like Suzanne said, if you want to ask us or about the stuff we're talking about, just throw your hand up. We've got an hour to cover here, and we have about half an hour of material. So hopefully you guys have lots of questions, and feel free to, don't shout them out, but put the hands in the air. We're going to, what's that?
They can shout it.
What?
They can shout it out. Yeah,
you can shout it out. Okay, sure, fine. So we're going to move on to the first question. When we started spitballing ideas about things to talk about, one of the things that we both didn't really think about when we got into the work that we do now was, don't just take the first job offer that comes. Don't necessarily just go look for the biggest benefit package or the most amount of cash. Start with the right questions to ask about where you want to work. And this is a real important question. Size matters. Do you want to work for a small company or even for yourself, or do you want to go and work for a big, large company? I have lots of experience working, like I said, working for myself and for home, so I thought I'd talk from the small company, some of the small company pros and cons. One of the things that you can benefit from working for a small company is you can wear lots of different hats. You can photocopy in the morning, write code in the afternoon, and sell on the weekends. There's lots of different things you can do. But there's lots of negatives, of course, too. The chances for promotion are very slim because there's not this corporate ladders that you can climb. Your pay is probably not as good as if you were working for the Royal Bank or TELUS or something like that. You get to work on a wide variety of projects when you work with small web dev companies and things like that. You'll have a new project sometimes every day. Sometimes you'll work with 5 or 6 completely different companies, different clients that you get to meet, and that's kind of fun for me. Software development, you might be writing the same kind of code over and over and over again. Some of the things to watch out for with small companies, they're not necessarily stable. So if you need stability in your life, and there's a good chance that a lot of you guys don't have that requirement in your lives at this age. You have a wife and kids at home, mortgage payments, things are going to change, and you can always switch around a little bit later on. But those are some of the big ones with smaller companies.
Right, and so I'll cover the big company things, but not because I have a lot of experience with big companies. I have worked for a couple, but I think for contrast, obviously, is more competitive pay. You can make a lot more money a lot sooner in a bigger company compared to a smaller one, which have limited resources in order to pay you, but hopefully they do pay you. The benefits, obviously, if you like health benefits, some people do, you're going to get that in a big company for sure, rather than a smaller company which can't really afford to put up that big overhead to pay for your health benefits. Again, as Shane alluded to, if you have a family, if you have kids, that's very important to you probably, and you might want to follow up on a job that provides that. The position itself is more established, right? When you're introducing yourself, you say, I work at Microsoft or something like that. People are going to know that. People are going to be able to associate that with something. Where you say, I've got 14 oranges, like what the hell is that? What the hell is 14 oranges? And what's with that weird name? And also it's more stable, basically. So you know that over time you're going to be able to stay at that job for much longer, whereas the small company, actually, you know what, it's a trade-off, because the larger companies, they might have massive layoffs because their product's not doing well. You might be out the door, whereas a small company, their product never gets, or they're never generating enough revenue. It's another way that you're going to be leaving. But in general, there are trade-offs there. But another benefit is documentation. I know it sounds, in a smaller company, you're not going to get any documentation. Larger company, they're going to have a lot more assets, a lot more time and money to document their processes, and the fan turned off, which is great. The bad thing about being in a big company is obviously like the politics of it, the bureaucracy, which I talked about documentation being a benefit of it, but it's also a negative as well. You're going to have to be dealing with a lot of BS, so you're going to have to get ready for it, right? In a big company, you have a manager who's a manager of a manager, and you have this huge corporate ladder that you kind of have to navigate through to do anything that you want. It can be tedious. It can be kind of frustrating when you're dealing with that. Just like that, you're basically really a small fish in a really big pond. Whereas at a small company, you'll have a lot more say in what happens and what you can, you can go up to the CEO and you can say, hey, I think there's a better idea that we can do here. We can follow up on this and do a better way of doing it. He's likely to listen to you, whereas in a big company, you're not heard. Basically, you're less likely to be heard.
A good example of that with a small company, the benefits would be with 14 Oranges. They're a lot of senior guys there, like I said, so they were really locked into SVN for version control. But we're a small company, so when the web dev guys said, hang on, Git's the way to go, Git's the way to go, Git's the way to go, you know what? They made the case and they changed their minds, and we all use Git. We're all in Bitbucket and Git now. And with a big company, good luck in, at the very bottom of the chain, getting that all the way up to the decision, because like Suzanne said, I got your name right. There's so many levels on the way up before decisions get changed.
Yeah, and as we said, your preference might change depending on where you are in life. If you're married, family, mortgage, whether you prefer a smaller company or you need a larger company, that's also going to affect it. Obviously, I don't have kids, so I don't really care, but Shane does. So, do you have anything else to add for this? Yeah. I think something like what you learn in here, I think, is how to learn, right? Basically, something they teach you how to go out and get that knowledge and apply it. So I think even small or big company, you're gonna rely on you to do that. They're not just gonna present you with information and you're gonna absorb it automatically. So I think that's like, even when my background in engineering and going through school, I didn't really come out with being an amazing engineer. I basically learned how to learn what I need to, when I need to. So I go and I figure out what my issue is, how to solve it, and I kind of apply it to the problem.
So, from my experience with Delta Biz, with web development days, when we hired a junior developer, a lot of them were
Do you guys do mostly just web development, right? You don't do mobile application development? No? Okay. So we've talked about the size of the company and how you can sort of think about what matters to you, but there's also another aspect, and a lot of companies are offering more and more of these as perks. And you want to basically, don't be seduced by the perks, obviously, because there's going to be so many thrown at you, especially in the tech industry. They want a way to keep you in and keep you engaged so you can put the most output for them, right? So you have to consider a lot of things when you're doing that, right? So be careful of the pitfalls of working too much, right? Because their whole goal is to just keep you there all the time. Like for EA, for example, because my wife works at EA, you know, you can drop your car off for a car wash and get your dry cleaning done. Gym facilities in there. You don't have to leave full showers, basically, right? So you don't have to. You never have to leave, and you have like the kitchen and everything. So try to keep that in mind because you want to be able to work-life balance, and we're going to get to that later. Also, the perks that they're offering you, they come at a cost, right? And that cost has to translate to what would you rather have? Would you rather have that income? Would you rather have that money as a salary? Would you rather have it in the perks that they're offering? Obviously, perks cost money, right? And the perks trade off with your career growth and the fulfillment you get from the job that you're doing. Also, in the beginning, obviously, there's the honeymoon period, right? You're going in there, you have beer Fridays or whatever, and you're getting drunk with your buddies. It's great, but in the end, what are you really getting out of it? It's about your career. It's about where you're going and how you're going to get there. It's not about having some free beers on a Friday.
And along those lines, just the foosball table's nice. The ping pong table's nice, and we disagree on this. I thought ping pong was awesome for the first 3 months, and now work-life balance kicked in. I don't get to see my kids if I take an hour-long lunch and play ping pong. I don't get to pick them up from school. Decision's easy for me. We're going to have a different decision there, and that's one of the things is bear in mind where you are in life. I can't stress that enough, and remember that will change. So looking for a company, if you're married already and you're looking to have kids in the next couple of years, remember, you're not going to care about 9 a.m. drop-off at school and 3 p.m. pickup from school. It's not going to be a factor for you now, but in a few years it might be. So companies that are proactive in that nature and allow working from home opportunities or less flexible work schedules and whatnot may be a real perk and maybe something to think about. Along the lines of what Suzanne was saying, weigh the benefits of these perks. So benefits, everybody asks for them. We interview people all the time, and everybody asks, what's your benefits package? How many times are you going to the doctor for fancy things right now in your life? Weigh that cost, and then look at the difference between one company that offers benefits and the next one that doesn't, but will offer you $20,000 more a year in a salary or something like that. And think about the cost of those benefits, because it costs a company a lot of money to give those benefits, and you're going to see the decrease in your salary as a factor in that. So it's worth thinking of. Again, I have kids, and we don't have benefits right now. $10,000 in braces coming in the next few months, and I kind of wish I was with a company that had benefits, but we're working on that. Another thing to think about the commute. Look at where they're located, think about the commute, and think about how that's going to apply, not now in your life, but over the next few years, because it can be a huge factor. Yes? You're totally right, and that goes into some of the interviewing stuff. Remember that when you're into these interviews with people, ask them about their corporate culture. Ask if you can talk to the other employees and ask what their demands are. With 14 Oranges, we're a very flexible company, and we allow most of our staff actually works from home regularly. We had a work from work day today, which was why we had Indian food for lunch. It was yeah. I actually work from the office, but yeah, it's one of those things to keep in mind. Or to ask them about, ask the interviewer about it, and ask to speak to some of the other staff and just say, what kind of demands are there? I know, and remember, the other route, the other direction, being an entrepreneur, starting your own company, don't kid yourselves. You are going to be working ridiculous hours. You're going to be working right through the night. You're going to be, especially when you're getting started, and if you just become a basement web development company, I've been there, you will be putting in crazy hours, and it will be costing you because you promised one deadline, you promised one of your clients / friends that their website will be ready by Friday. Nobody else to do it but you, so you're going to be putting in crazy hours. Those demands are there. Yeah, at least you're giving your own time and not. Yeah. It really depends. It depends on the company you're working for. Is so dependent on that. They have strict HR policies in the larger companies, and there's ways to file grievances and all that kind of stuff. So then, with you working in union shops, there's all the extra headaches. I would say you couldn't really compare the two, small versus large, in this context. It's apples and oranges, and it's completely individual to each company. Any other questions on the perks? And you will hear them. Like when you start going for the interviews, they're going to tell you about the foosball, they're going to tell you about the kitchen, they're going to tell you about all that stuff. Just weigh the benefits and weigh the negatives. So we're going to get into a little bit more into the technical side of things, just sort of lessons learned. Like Suzanne said earlier, I don't know if he said it, he's an Android developer, full-time Android developer. So he does the software development side of things, and I'm sales guy, formerly a web developer. So we have different approaches, but we've learned the same lessons in different ways, so we're going to try and share a little bit of that sort of information. One of the things to think about when you're approaching, and you guys, I think you guys deal with problem solving. Your instructor was mentioning earlier, you guys talk about how to solve problems and how to analyze those problems and find solutions. One of the factors to think about is it worth the bubblegum and duct tape quick fix or the long-term properly documented solution? I wanted to talk a little bit about, I'll use it as an example. You're developing a website and your boss comes in, or there's a website existing, I should say, and your boss comes in and says, that word in the middle of the page, it's red right now. I want to turn it yellow. Well, the easiest way, you guys have done some web dev, the easiest way to do that is to find that page, go to that line, go wrap it in a tag, style, color equals yellow. Done, you're done. Now, what happens with that? Short term is your boss is happy, everything's great, you got it done in 15 minutes. Long term, you just broke the templating engine. And when you come back in 3 months and they rewrite the whole template and it breaks and the whole website fails and your boss freaks and you have to rewrite the whole template engine with a week's worth of development time versus that extra time you could have spent locating it in the right place in the code and all that stuff. It's really important to look at, realize you might not know all the answers and to do it the right way. Spend the time, fix it the right way. So one of the other things, I'll pass the mic to Suzanne. He's got a couple of other points on this.
Right, like as Shane said, when someone approaches you, like your manager, and wants you to make a quick fix on something, it's a lot easier to push back early than to apologize later, right? You have the ability to like you said, I don't know. I'm not against the hacks. Okay, I'll be honest. I don't mind hacks as long as you can comment your hack. I mean, honestly, it's going to happen. It's going to happen all the time, especially mobile application and web, I suppose. But if you don't comment your hack and I come and fix it, I'm gonna be pissed off at you, and because I have no idea what you've done or why you've done it, and that for me alleviates a lot of the responsibility that goes along with it. I know that circumstances sometimes are always different, right? So sometimes you can't avoid it. Sometimes you have to do something, budgetary constraints on the project, time deadlines and stuff like that. So if it's unavoidable, just do what you have to do, but just comment it so that someone down the line, someone else like me, some lowly developer who needs to fix that problem in a month, knows what's going on.
Sure, but just along those lines of commenting it, putting the little funny things in the comments and stuff and apologizing for it ahead of time and explaining it works. And the next dev that comes by, he won't hate you because of it later. Just feel free to be fun in the comments once in a while. Keep the job a little bit more entertaining.
Next one. So the next slide we're going to talk about is really just keeping your ego at the door. As you become a developer and get a full-time job and you're developing and whatever, you have an ego that goes along with it. And every engineer, every developer has one. You think you're the greatest. You think you're going to do the best job or whatever. And that pride and that ego can actually hinder your abilities because basically you might be stuck on a problem. You might have an issue that you've encountered. And instead of being, the team player and I guess going and involving maybe another set of eyes and getting in a second opinion by a coworker, you're going to sit there for hours because you can fix this. It's, I can do this, no big deal. But you've essentially eaten up the company time. You've gone and wasted company time and resources, and you could be doing something else rather than sitting there going through line after line of code. So really drop that ego. You can get that second set of eyes. It's really going to help you out, save you a lot of time for sure. Code reviews. I'm a big fan of code reviews. Some people hate it because it's a time waster, but again, you got to put that ego away and listen to other people who are experienced and they know, the coding style of the company that you're working for, because every company is going to be different. Every language is going to be different, obviously. So sit down, maybe you can maybe push for it for a manager. Maybe the manager might appreciate that because it shows that you're being proactive, that you want to, better your abilities and your skills. Sit down, and it really benefits everyone at the table too, because they're seeing what you're doing versus what they're doing. What they're doing could be improved as well. Everyone can always use some improvement.
Yeah, on this slide, I just wanted to talk about know your team too. You're going to be working in teams, obviously in this industry for the most part, with other people, and recognizing other people's strengths. Now, I and anyone who's ever developed with me will be the first ones to tell you I am not the best code writer. I'll get it done. I'll likely hack it together. I'll get it done quickly, and it'll work at the end. But the code's a mess, and it's not long-term maintainable. I'm self-taught, like I said, and it's just not my strength. Manu, our lead web dev, is unbelievably talented at code writing. It's perfect. It's so well documented. It's so efficient, and it makes a lot of sense. His weakness, if he has one, is bug testing, problem solving. His head doesn't work that way. So he'll get stuck on something, and he knows that that's where my strengths are. I'm a good problem solver. So he brings me in, doesn't let me touch a line of code, but walks through the situation with me, and I say, well, why don't you try this, or how don't you try this? So recognize the strengths and weaknesses in your team, particularly with bug testing and problem solving. There'll be those guys that are just really, really good at finding problems, and there'll be the guys that are really good at implementing solutions, and recognize that. That's all we wanted to say on this one. Oh, and just the tunnel vision. When you're writing the code, sometimes you don't even need to go and find somebody else. Just if you're locked at something, you've written all day, you're right here, and you can't figure that out, and you're looking here. You forget to look back. Get up, walk away, go outside, go for a walk, go play a round of golf, do whatever, and then come back with a fresh set of eyes and start at the beginning of the problem again. And I can't tell you how many times that approach has helped me out. And do you want to talk about the?
Yeah. Actually, like another tool that I use to sort of get through issues that are holding me back is just try to talk the problem out loud. And I think it's called rubber duck problem solving or something like that, debugging. But basically, you just talk it out. Just explain what you're doing step by step, listing all the details, and then eventually you're like, wait, that doesn't make any sense. Like, why did I do that? Why didn't I? And then eventually you'll come to solve the problem, and you did it all on your own, and you didn't have to bother anyone, which is always nice. Yeah, and you guys know what code reviews are. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory, but I mean, I'm not going to go into it. Yeah, why not? This is one that I use a lot. I try to avoid coding as much as possible. I try to reuse anything and anything I can find. I just go out and I search for it, scour the internet, just look anywhere you can. And not because I'm a terrible developer, because I probably am, but it's because I don't want to have to deal with all the bugs I got to fix and everything. I know it's been done elsewhere. I know that there's a lot of open source projects out there. GitHub. You can go and search GitHub for anything that you could possibly. Someone's already done it, of course, multiple times, multiple different ways for every different platform and every language. So you can go out there, look for it. Try to pick one that has a lot of collaborators, hopefully, that isn't just something that's stale and probably abandoned. But once you do that, yeah, you can incorporate that a lot easier than you can sit down, plan a solution that you have to code from scratch and save yourself a lot of time and headache. Obviously, with GitHub, you can Google it, but I just have something in here that says if you get to page 2 of Google, you're screwed. Like, there's nothing. Like, just abandon hope. And if you can't find anything, then you just have to write it yourself. And we talk about that in a later slide, where about planning and stuff like that, where it really comes in handy. But that's a last resort. Don't write code. Avoid it.
But when you need to write code, and it will happen, think in terms of you're not going to use that piece of code one time. In a lot of scenarios, where you can, remove it from the logic itself. I'm going to use all the wrong terms, as like I said, I'm a self-taught guy. But turn it into something that you can put in your own repo that you can reuse the next time you need to do a task that's very similar. And the first place, again, to look isn't GitHub or Google necessarily. When you look back to your own team's code base and work with your team and talk about how you're going to do it. Do it from day one, because I started doing it at about day 7 years, and by then it was too late. We'd rewritten the same thing 17 times, database abstraction layer. Find what's out there, adapt it to your needs, put it inside some scaffolding tools, and keep that thing handy, because you're going to need it 7 times next week. So really think when you're writing code, put it into usable, compartmentalize the code, and make sure it's reusable, and make sure that your team's aware of it. Create a wiki. This is something that I was terrible at, was documenting what our team was doing for years. And our CEO is awesome at it, and our QA lead is awesome at it. Yeah, I know. But inside the wiki now, we have all that stuff documented. So for instance, a good example of this is when you launch a site on cloud sites with Rackspace, which is what we use a lot of, it's not tuned at all for speed. And page speed, and YSlow and page speed with Google are super important. And there's a ton of directives that you can add to the htaccess file. You paste them in there, drop the htaccess file, you'll take your score from a 67 on page speed to like an 80 plus, depending on a few different factors. One piece of code, one file. So put that file somewhere that's easy to access and put it in the wiki. Explain to everybody else in the company, hey, when you're going to launch the site, make sure that this is one of the last steps. Drop that thing in there, and boom, it'll boost your page speed. Instead of them having to do all the research to come up with all those directives themselves.
When it comes to using libraries, I've kind of been screwed by this before. Make sure you check the licensing on it, because sometimes you have to pay or you have to open source your own project if you want to incorporate it. So yeah, just look at the license and make sure it's available for commercial purposes if you're planning on making money.
Any questions on that stuff? Okay, we're shy on the questions. Come on, there's got to be some questions so far. On any of the stuff we've talked about so far? Oh, come on, guys and gals. Yeah, oh yeah, there you go. What? This is from the wrong perspective, and I don't know if this was a good one or not, but when in the Delta Biz days, I did sliders. So sliders once a month on Friday. It's a term from the Navy. When you're in the military, a lot of times when you're in garrison, you're in the base, on Fridays they'll let you slide 3 hours early. Just after lunch, hey guys, this time's yours. Oh, not little mini burgers. So with Delta Biz, we did that for a while. This was when there was only about, I guess, 7 of us, and I was one Friday a month, and it would be random. I would just email everybody that morning and say, hey guys, your 3 hours in the afternoon's on me. And that was an unexpected perk, I think. Again, I was the one giving it, so I don't know how the staff thought of it. But that was probably the most unexpected one for me.
I guess, I don't know, RMT's therapy, like the massage thing they give you, that's pretty good. That'll relax you in a while. But I can't really think of one. I think that's the best one I've had. And I love playing foosball. So if they have a tornado foosball table, then I'm pretty much happy. Like, that's the one. Like Google, like 20%? Yeah. I've actually never experienced that. But my question to that is, do you own the stuff that you work on? Do you think that if you're working on a side project 20% of your time, chances are your employer owns that, right? So if you want to sort of later on productize it and get a business going, likely they own it. I would imagine, because it's on their time and their money. I don't know, using their resources. Yeah, I haven't seen that personally though in any of the jobs.
At 14 Oranges, we do have one policy that it's not quite to those. It's not work on your own project, but 20% of your time work on 14 Oranges stuff. So that's sometimes internal projects. Sometimes it's just, hey, that database abstraction layer needs rewriting. Rewrite it, and you do it, and it's not part of any other project. But you're encouraged to just look for stuff that needs improving. So it's along similar lines, but not quite the same thing. I think there was a question in the back. Yep. I'll just talk about and I have very limited experience with code reviews. The only code reviews that I deal with right now in my day-to-day business is some of our bigger customers. So PMC Sierra, we're working with them right now on a project, and our guys are there in-house, and their stuff is reviewed by PMC. They have their own code review process. So that's internally. I don't know that we...
I think it's pretty explanatory, like self-explanatory when you think, like, the way I've done it before in the past is you sit down, you have a bunch of different teammates, and you go through line by line. You say, why did I do this? Why did I choose this approach? Why didn't I choose another approach? Which one's superior? Which one's inferior? You kind of go over your design decisions, and it really makes you think about what you've done and how you're going to do it in the future as well, right? Because a lot of times when you come back to a project that you've already done, and you would scrap it and do it all completely different because you probably screwed it up. I think your instructor was talking about version 2.0 being the best thing ever. So if you can get there. Pair programming, I mean, we don't really usually do it. I think it's part of like extreme programming. Is that this Agile does it too? Okay, so basically. Semicolon there or something like that. Catch a lot of smaller mistakes that you would like forget or just blaze over or whatever, right? Yeah, the thing is, a small company, you don't have as many people, right? So it means you're taking one person solely dedicated on another project and putting them on something else that's already got resources, right? It becomes kind of wasteful.
Projects that we're working on would be one web dev, one iOS guy, one Android guy, and they would work in different pieces, but they'd be so far apart from each other right now.
My mom's an instant? You know about that? Here, why don't you do
Sure. Okay. So, from my perspective, I worked from home for 10 years by myself. And that will happen for lots of people, and either part-time or full-time basis. Some of the things to keep in mind: don't get locked in your house. It's really easy to turn into a vampire and just write code all the time and hang out behind Google Hangouts and Messenger windows, and so a couple of things I marked down. Get involved in the community or get involved in something. Be something outside of work. So, and outside of family and outside of work. So for me, that's Rotary or curling. I know I'm old, but you build that network. You go out and do stuff regularly. Second thing is, don't be afraid to get on the phone. These things still actually make phone calls. Call people, talk to people, friends and business. Don't just hide behind emails and stuff, because it's important to keep that's part of your brain working all the time. Play sports, again, curling, if you can call it a sport, is the only sport that I've played in a bunch of years. And golf once in a while. When I worked from home, actually, I would go golfing at my lunch break. I was able to get out, hit 9 holes, and get back in an hour, because I would run, and it was a lot of fun. One of the things, this is from an experience with one of my former employees and also a cousin-in-law, worked for me for a couple years, and he worked from home, and he couldn't do it because his gaming PC and his work PC were the same thing, and he gamed all the time, and he found it extremely challenging. He got much better when we moved into an office, and he came with us into the office, but he still found it very challenging. So that's one of the things in sort of work life, is keep some separation there. When you're working on your work desktop, don't have access to the things like games, and if you can possibly manage it, maybe have a different login or something like that. Separate the fun stuff from the work stuff so that you can really put your head into it. One of the tricks I used when I worked from home was I would get up in the morning. I didn't start work right away. Don't. Get up, have a cup of coffee, go for a walk. I would go to Tim Hortons, grab a coffee, and I'd walk home. In my head, when I came home, I was walking into my office. And when I left and I went and had lunch, I came back into my office after lunch. And then when I called it a day, I left my office. And it was just mental checkbox, but it helped me keep my life and work separate, and allowed me to do it successfully for 10 years. You want to talk about working from home at all? Oh, okay, there we go. All right, I skipped ahead a few slides.
That's what we have a lot of experience with, right? Because I mean, you can't beat it, obviously, but there are obviously advantages working in an office, right? You have that place where you can go and then leave, and then you don't think about work. That's great. Except when you're home, there's your workspace, there's your workstation. You're constantly thinking about it, constantly doing more things about it. Like, it never leaves your mind, which is actually really unhealthy. So Shane talked a lot about networking outside of work, not career-based. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about career-based networking and how you can get your name out there. The inevitability that maybe you might lose your job. You need to get back into the job market, and you know that person that's looking. Someone's got an opening at their company, and they need you with your skill set. So something that you can do is, although I shouldn't preach it because I've never done it, but join an open source community. Contribute to projects. Just have a way that you're out there and you contribute. You can show what you've done and how you go about doing it, the cleanliness of your code, your skill set, what you've done. Also you can start your own portfolio. Hosting a website, you guys know all about that. It costs nothing per year, but you having that domain, and you can just reference people. You can give them a business card or something, and then they know exactly who you are, what you can do, some projects that you like and that you want to put on display and really show off. Obviously, places like Lighthouse Labs, like you come here and you're with a lot of like-minded individuals who are interested in the same exact thing, right? You guys want to learn how to code. You want to go out there. You want to problem solve. You're all kind of in the same boat. So you're going to be able to talk to each other in the future. You're going to remember him. He's going to remember you. And if you ever need anything, guess what? It's bound to happen. I've talked to so many former coworkers and people that I've met throughout my years that have helped me out. Obviously, social media, everyone does it. Everyone probably has a LinkedIn account. LinkedIn's probably one of the best ones. I mean, even Kirsten, our marketing specialist, is like sending out emails saying, share this and update that, put a picture or something, The very basic things that I didn't have, which she helped me on. But that will help recruiters find you. And a lot of times, like I've gotten a lot of like messages from recruiters saying, hey, we're this company, we're going to be in this area looking for new people. Would you be interested or whatever? And if you're not employed, which I have been, I've never contacted them. But yeah, that's what I think. Shane, do you have anything else to add? Do you just want to go to the next one?
Sure. Just on the networking thing, sort of along the lines of what Suzanne was saying, the people that you're going to meet, they may not seem like potential business or potential work or a job source right now, but down the road they may be, and your life's going to change. So for instance, I was a web developer. I'm a business development sales guy now, and that'll happen. Lots of the career that you think you're going to start off in may not be that career the whole way through. You may end up sort of finding that you're good at talking, or you're good at sales, or you're good at management, and so those roles are going to change. So build that network when you're out doing these things in the community, you're out playing sports. Make sure you contact those people, add them on LinkedIn, keep the conversation going too, and then when your life is slow or you have some time, reach out, ping them again. Just say, hey, how are things? And you'll be amazed. That's what my trick with sales in web dev days, when it was just me or one or two devs, it would be, oh, we're slow, oh man, or we feel like we're going to be slow, and I just would open up my Rolodex and just send every single person on an email. Just, hey, how you doing? Small talk. Weather's been awesome. You guys been out on the boat? Whatever random things you can remember about those people, ping them and keep that network going and churn it through, and it'll turn into opportunities down the road, guaranteed. And even the first rule of sales is build the relationship, because they may not buy something from you today, but if they remember you and you build that relationship and they trust you, they'll buy something from you eventually, or they'll recommend you to somebody else. Absolutely. Now, I think you wanted to talk about Tinder, right?
Oh yeah. No, we're gonna throw it out there. We're gonna say, how do you guys like to meet new people? Like, what do you guys do to get out there and sort of network and get your name out there? Because obviously, if you look around you, got a lot of competition. These people all want what you guys want, right? So you got to be able to put yourself up and a little bit higher than everyone else. What do you guys do besides Tinder? That's what he was supposed to say. How do you meet new people? Yeah. If you're not bashing their faces in or something like that. Yeah, best friends, yeah. Yeah, sure. You want to go to the next piece? Oh, wow. Okay. How many pop culture references are in this thing? That's incredible. It's what, marketing, hey? Yeah. So this, I'm going to give this one to Shane because he's got a really good analogy that he wants to give you guys about this slide.
So, with the concept of measure twice, cut once, I mean, you guys have probably heard this a lot while you're going through this training, is plan, 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 plan. I mean, there's lots of different slogans, fail to plan, or plan to fail, and you know the one I'm trying to say. When you're developing stuff, even if it's a simple one-page little website for somebody, look at what the requirements are. Do some planning. There's lots of different approaches to planning, and you mentioned Agile before. How many people have heard of Agile? Okay, I'll give a quick explanation. When you're planning to do any sort of development, software development, there's lots of approaches, but there's two approaches I'll talk about right now. One is called waterfall. You do the planning at the beginning, you decide all the requirements of the project, and then you go, okay, devs, go build this. And then when they're done, and all the requirements and all the testing and all the QA is done, they deliver it. You're done. And then the client has questions, and there's lots of things that need changing. And so the analogy Suzanne was referring to is I say, okay, I want to build a house. I know where I want to build a house. It's over there on that lot. So the project manager from the construction company comes up and says, hey, you want a house? Right on. Well, what do you want in that house? I want it to be big. It's got to have 5 bedrooms. There's got lots of kids. It's got to be yellow, and I want it on that lot over there. Okay, cool. So he goes and he builds me a big yellow house with 5 bedrooms. And he builds it right up against the road on the front of the property. And at the end he says, here's your property, here's your house. And I go, oh, well, can you put it back 20 feet? Now, obviously problems there, right? You can't move a house 20 feet back very easily. With an agile style approach to that home building, you would do the planning at the beginning, and he would say, okay, I'm going to start the work on the layout of this house, and we're going to have a meeting in 3 days to review that. So he goes and he draws where the house is, and he stakes it out on the property right up against the road. And he comes back 3 days later and he does a walkthrough with me, and he says, okay, here's where your house is going to be. And I say, oh, well, can you move it 20 feet that way? Well, think about the difference in those two processes. It's obviously much easier for him to move that 4 stakes back 20 feet than it is to move the whole house. So those are the two. When you're planning through stuff, you'll learn lots about Agile as you go on in your careers in software development. I won't even try to tackle it right now. But do the planning, think it through, right from the database, from the design, from the UI, the user story. Go through all that stuff, even for the small and simple projects.
Yeah, I'll just quickly add something because I think we're running a little long. I hate doing this, but I do it. But functional specs, basically sitting down and writing out like stories, basically going and thinking about, okay, this user is going to be using this application in this way, in this manner, and they expect this this result. A lot of times, what you do is, by thinking about the problem like that, you encounter all the issues that you would up front. You'd be like, this is where the shortcomings are of this solution. This solution is going to run into this problem here, so we have to account for it. A lot of the different scenarios that you're going to think of are going to come through, and wireframes, right? You want to think about what is your application going to do, and how are you going to present that to the user? Is this a better way to do it, or is this a good enough way? You're going to be able to present that information to a certain user, and you're going to come up with a real solid answer, so you don't have to keep wasting time and redesigning and reiterating.
So yeah, we're going to move on now into, well, does anyone have any questions about that stuff first? Yes. Two experiences with the shared office space. One, I used to go and rent from a space when I needed meetings. When I was working from home and you had to have a meeting, you needed a boardroom, we would rent from some of those shared office spaces. They worked very well. Having a boardroom, being able to present in that kind of a big round table versus having people in your living room, highly recommended if you're working from home. But those shared offices, actually 14 Orange just started in, like the place next door, Launchpad. It was, I don't know what it's called now. It's a tech starter anyway, very similar. I can't remember actually, but this is before I was with 14 Oranges, but they did the same kind of thing. They actually had some office space with Wavefront, thank you. They had a person, when you showed up, to see that, the presence at the front and take you into the room and like the reception concept. If you're growing a company, it's imperative. You can't grow your company out of your living room. It doesn't work, especially if you want the bigger clients. They want that presence. They want that feeling. So a shared office is a great way. One thing I'd caution you though is if you want to be downtown in the fancy office with that's going to cost you money no matter if it's a shared office or not. If you're willing to make this, go into like we're at a BCIT aerospace campus. So it's right on the way to the airport. Big shiny building. The impact for when clients come to visit us is amazing, and what we pay out there compared to downtown is, it's ridiculously cheap. So think about that. Even if it's a shared office, sometimes it might be worthwhile to be out of town a little bit and look for some smaller space, shared tenant with a friend, like find another friend that needs office space and look into that sort of thing. Okay, we got 2 slides left, I think 2 or 3. So we're going to talk a little bit more about when you guys start to go out and look for jobs, some of the skills that you're going to, or some of the things to think about. So one, even right now, like the person beside you, maybe your best friend may not, you may think you probably won't stay in touch with them, or maybe you loathe them. It's irrelevant. You're going to meet that person again in this city in your lifetime as a software developer if you stay here and work. It's going to happen. This is a small town. If you 2 million people or whatever it is, 3 million people. So quick example of that, I hired a guy. He worked for me for a few years. We'll call him Lyle. He was a terrible developer, I'm not going to lie. Really nice guy, terrible developer. I had to fire him, and I was pissed off that I had to fire him because he represented himself so poorly as to what he ended up doing for me. But I kept it in okay terms, and sure enough, 2 years later, my biggest customer, that my new customer comes in, and who's their internal web dev? This guy. that had worked for me for 2 years. So it will happen. You'll run across these people again. So don't burn your bridges. Keep the network open. And one of the other things is the biggest lesson I ever learned in business. So 10 years of owning my own company and now with 14 Oranges, the biggest lesson I ever learned, don't be afraid to say, I'm sorry. With the guy next to you, with your customers. If the customer calls and complains that, oh my God, my website's down, you guys host my website, I'm so pissed off, I'm losing business. Start that conversation off with, it's not my fault, and guess where it's going to lead down? It's going to lead down a rabbit hole of you losing that customer. Start that conversation off with, I am sorry, what can I do to help? Even if you're not the hosting provider, you have nothing to do with their website, you just know the person. Start the conversation off with, I'm sorry, how can I help? Same with when somebody complains about the code that you wrote, I'm sorry, how can I help? It will time and again prove its weight, or be worth its weight in gold if you're willing to just take the high road and say, I'm sorry, how do I provide a solution? It'll also provide you with more work because you're going to be fixing the problem, right? So.
Yeah, be the good Canadian and say I'm sorry. So, actually, how I came to be at 14 Oranges right now is I used to work for the CEO of 14 Oranges when we both worked at a previous company called Counterpath, and so he was the VP of something, and we had a good relationship. And when he went off to start 14 Oranges, he later called me up and said, "Hey, do you want to come work for us?" And we got to talking, and it was a good idea. It was a worthwhile idea. So I got poached, which is going to happen a lot, really, because it's such a small market, right? Such a small industry that, especially when you're working in the same sub-industry, right? In that case, it was VoIP telephony. That you're going to know a lot of the same people. You're going to know that this guy worked on this project, and he does this. This is his strengths, his weaknesses. So you're going to be able to call on those people a lot more often. But the statement of "don't burn your bridges" it applies a lot more to that sub-industry, right? Like VoIP telephony, or somebody in gaming, or I don't know, some other software sub-industry. So be careful, right? Be respectful. Don't write trashy emails to each other. You know, read your emails, because when you're trying to convey emotions to that, sometimes they get lost, right? And so you might come out looking like an asshole. It's happened to me many times.
So one other example of the burn the bridges, I had a guy that came and applied for a job with me, and at the end, there's no way I was hiring this guy. He didn't have the skills, didn't fit the part. So at the end of the interview, I said, "Hey, I'm not going to hire you, but you want some." So I was trying to be a nice guy. I said, "Do you want some feedback?" And he's like, "Huh?" "Yeah, sure." And I said, "Well, you didn't have the skills to work on your resume, but more importantly, you're coming for a job interview. Don't dress like you dressed." He looked like he'd walked in off the street, and it was not cool. It's just. He was wearing ripped, cut-off jean shorts and a ripped T-shirt, to a job interview, and I just said, "Sorry, bud, you got to dress the part. Just take it up a notch. You don't need to have a fancy wardrobe. This is the fanciest that I dress in tech. You don't need to be fancy, right? But dress the part." And what happened is I said that to him. I said, just some constructive criticism. I'm not hiring you because of your resume, but that didn't work well. He went home and bashed my company all over social media. And I was a small company, and that did not. It took me years to repair some of the damage that he did in that one. And all I did was I was trying to be helpful, but just show people courtesy, show people respect, and I've learned my lesson. I don't complain about what people wear to job interviews anymore.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the job and how to, what do you do when you get the job? What about actually getting the job? Like the interview skills that you need to have, because a lot of these interviews can be very technical, and that can be it can be really tough. Like I've had technical interviews that I felt I failed. That was terrible. Like, why would anyone hire me? And I got a call back. It doesn't make any sense. It's not because they're looking for the right answer, And they ask you a lot of weird questions, and Shane's asked these questions too, and I hate them. But anyway, really, but just consider that the interview isn't actually just them interviewing you. You're interviewing them, right? You're applying to work with them, and you want to make sure that you're a right fit. You're going to fit in with their culture. You're not going to clash heads with their management. They got the same sort of mindset and the ideas that you have. Make sure you're the right fit. Make sure you creep their website. Absolutely. Go in there and just look at everything they have. Try to hack it if you can, if that would be impressive. Okay. Maybe don't do that. But yeah, just go in there and see what products they have. Maybe you used it. If you have, great, because now you have some common interest with them. Like you have things that you can talk about for an hour and a half, right? You can just keep going on and on. They're going to love that. They're going to know that you have interest in their products, what they do, their services, whatever. Ask questions, ask lots of questions, come prepared, but don't ask stupid questions, because there are such thing as stupid questions, especially if you could have just read it in the job posting, and you go and ask, "So what kind of revision control do you use?" Well, it says it right there, Why would you ask me that? You could have done a little more research, obviously. That shows that you're unprepared. This is another one that we we kind of differ on, and I don't like doing it. They ask you all the time, what about salary? They're like, what do you think you're going to get paid? Well, why would I answer that? It's lose-lose. I'm not going to tell you how much I think I'm going to make. Why don't you tell me what you want to pay me, and I'll tell you if it's good enough, right? Shane disagrees. He asked this question. So really it's like tangoing. You have to try to like avoid it, but do it politically and like get around it, because he's going to look for an answer, and I'm going to try to avoid giving him one.
The reason I used to ask that question, I didn't really. You're looking at two people when you're hiring web devs, junior web devs. You're looking at people that want to be a contractor and people that want to be an employee. And I was trying to hire an employee. So if somebody said $85 an hour to my salary expectations, I knew they were a contractor looking for contract work. It was an easy way. But I also, and this is one of the things that keep in mind when you read. I said, read the effing manual. Read the job posting. There's going to be so much information in there. A lot of times you need to be specific about. So if they ask you a question or they set up a time or do this to do this, they give you instructions in there, follow those instructions. So when I said in my job interview, I always asked a question, please submit salary expectations with your submission. I would get 100 resumes that day, and I instantly threw away the ones that didn't address that question. They didn't need to provide me with the answer, but I needed to know that they read that question and had addressed it. I didn't need the actual number. You're going to see a lot of that. They're going to ask questions, or they're going to be specific in the job posting about what you should be doing to apply for the job. Send a one-page cover letter. Send a one-page cover letter. It's really not that difficult. So just follow the instructions in it. So think about the process of the job interview when you're there. We do a lot of job interviewing, and when I sit down with the people, I see people that give up way too easily. So there's a lot of funny questions that different companies use. We use a question, and I'll even share it with you guys today. We use a question that is an interesting one our CEO came up with, well, actually a former friend of his came up with. How many fire hydrants are there in the city of Vancouver? That's the question. It seems silly, seems ridiculous, right? I mean, maybe there's a trivia buff in the back of the room that knows the answer to that question, but it's completely irrelevant. Ask yourself, why is Shane asking me that question? Well, I want to see you wiggle. I want to see you sweat. I want to see you under a little bit of pressure and feeling uncomfortable, and I want to see how you're going to react to that. Then I want to see you problem solve. That's the reason the questions are asked, the tough questions. There's other, Amazon uses some really interesting ones where they actually give you easy questions that get harder as you go, and they want to see you learn. This purpose of this question is to see you analyze a problem, come up with a rational way of solving that problem. That one, I'm not going to give you the answer to it, but it's relatively simple once you think about it on how to apply and come up with a somewhat close answer to the real number. Challenge you to do it when you get home. So what I'm saying is when you're in the interview and somebody asks you those types of difficult questions, they want to see you sweat and they want to see you respond confidently and problem solve. If you don't know the answer and can't find a solution, say that. I don't know the answer. I'll tell you how I would find it. Provide solutions. That's what the job interviewer is looking for. So, what's that? Yeah. Any questions about interview stuff? Because that's one thing you're all going to go through, and there's some. I wouldn't say it's one versus the other. So when I'm interviewing somebody, if they don't have the skills, they don't get the job. That's simple. So that's a yes or a no. They can either do it or they can't. And there's going to be people that can do it better and worse, but if they don't meet a sort of baseline test there, it's a non-starter. The personality stuff is pretty important. It doesn't mean you need to be like my new best friend during an interview, but common courtesy, respect, asking questions too. Like I want to work with people that are going to challenge me and challenge the people around them to come up with better solutions and new solutions to the problems that we face every day. So I want you to ask me questions. I want you to say, well, you said doing this with jQuery in the test, but why aren't you doing this whole thing in Angular? It doesn't make any sense. Ask that question. I'll be like blown away and you're going to get hired, right? So be yourself first and foremost. But yeah, one doesn't necessarily outweigh the other.
True, but at the same time.
Yeah.
And that's toxic.
Yeah, some of the other may seem obvious to some people, but some of the tricks for an interview. Dress the part. Now that means dress the part. That doesn't mean wear a suit. The two are not the same. If you're in tech in Vancouver and you walk in a suit, and we had a guy do this, walked in for a QA job and he walked in a suit, and it just didn't fit, It didn't feel right. I mean, he was walking into a company where I just felt underdressed, because none of us wear suits ever. We put a jacket on when we went to one or two clients over the years, but that's about it. Same goes if you're applying for an IT job at a law firm, you better find out what they wear to a law firm, and I'll tell you very quickly, they all wear suits. Everybody does. So wear a suit to that one. So just dress the part and show up appropriately ready for the environment that you're going to be in. Prep yourself for the site. If you have a choice where to sit, make sure get there early. Get there at least 5 minutes early. If you're showing up right on time for a job interview, it's a big check mark against you, right at the top of the list. Show up 5 minutes early and sit there. And when you're sitting there, look busy. Look like you're researching. Look around. Don't just. Yeah. He's got one more question. Well, and ask to do it with a pen and paper. Ask to use a laptop, or ask to use Google. Ask questions. Solve the problems again. So, if you have a laptop with you, when we do with the test that we do for web devs, and I'll quickly run it through. I say, okay, you have an HTML page. It's got a bunch of divs on it. Some are red, some are black, and some have a class of red, some have a class of black, and some have no class at all. Write me using jQuery. I just say, write me a function using JavaScript that will go through and echo or console.log the number red, the number black, and the number with none of either. Write that code. Really simple. It's very, very easy to do. Some of you guys haven't done JavaScript coding yet, but first question is, I need to use jQuery. Can I? Ask the question, because it's way easier with jQuery than trying to do it with pure JavaScript. Then if you're not conceptual, you'd rather, can I borrow a laptop? They'll go get, you're in a computer company. They'll bring you a laptop and then let you work on it, right? And then say, you know what, I'm not sure on the selector that I need to use in jQuery. Can I look it up? Just ask the questions, because I'd way rather work with a problem solver than somebody that isn't able to just get stuck and doesn't figure out, oh, I can't do this without looking at Google. Just say, hey, can I look at Google? Ask the questions. That's what I would suggest. Yeah. Can I copy paste this? Yes. Yeah. The fire hydrant one is probably the most unique one for me. Well, you do get the dumb questions from that direction. Yeah. Well, can I have Christmas off? It's an initial interview. You ask vacation days, and sure, but make sure it's late in the interview if you're going to ask that stuff. And you can say things like, well, I just want you to know that vacation days are pretty important to me. I travel quite a bit. If that's important to you, the person's not going to mind. We all take vacations, right? Actually, interesting stats we saw yesterday. I was sharing this with Suzanne earlier. Canada is so low on vacation days. The average vacation days for a Canadian are 19. You go to Europe and it's 30 plus in almost every country in Europe. It's astounding. It's also we have one of the longer work weeks in the Western world too. 36.5 hours is the average Canadian work week, and in many other countries it's below 30 or around 30, I should say. Yes. Look for a lot of empty desks.
But that doesn't make sense. We work from home, so when you go in.
Yeah, it's true, but it could be one of the warning signs. Yeah, true. But yeah, a lot of empty desks would be one. You can usually find out. You'll get the impression. Just listen to the questions, the way they're asked. But then ask the questions back again. Ask. So, are you guys growing? Ask about some of the customers. What kind of projects are you working on right now? You're hiring me into this role. What would be some of the first jobs that I might work on? Ask those questions, because it shows that you have an interest in the company. It shows that you have an interest in the work that you're going to be doing. Yeah. Absolutely. So the last slide that we have is work-life balance. We went over most of this, so we'll just kind of glance over. Oh, are we at 4? Okay. Actually, we talked about all those things. So one of the only one I say, find a lunch buddy. If you're working from home, find a friend that lives nearby, maybe somebody else that works from home. Reach out into the local community and find somebody and go for lunch with them once a week, minimum. It helps you keep sane. Yes, question in the back. I can't really talk to that, unfortunately, other than speculating because I've never been in that situation. I would just suggest if your spidey sense is tingling at all about the company, then ask the question: what's the downside? If you're not comfortable with that kind of a risk, because startups have a lot of perks that you can get in early on stock options and stuff like that too. So decide on your pucker factor. How much risk can you tolerate? And if you're feeling that at all, that this is a startup that might not have funding, ask straight up, because you don't want to get stuck in a job. The only downside to that is you wouldn't get the job. And if it was a risky company, you probably didn't want the job anyways. I've heard that question in interviews with 14 Oranges, and I'm happy to share the answers very, very regularly. I say our company has been growing 100% year on year for 5 straight years. I'm happy. Now, we're a company that's in a good situation. There may be reluctance to answer that question, but I wouldn't say it's a bad question to ask. There may be some people that would find it uncomfortable, but they may just say the worst answer you're going to get is likely we don't divulge that. That's it. But with 14 Oranges, we get asked that question. Not a lot, but once in a while. And they're usually phrased in more of the lines of, do you have lots in the hopper? Are you guys growing aggressively? What are your goals for growth in the next few years? And we're happy to answer those questions anytime they're asked. And we actually, Suzanne and I, that we usually do the interviewing together, that's our CEO, and we both smile when that question gets asked because we get excited about the company and we know that we're growing. It's a good question to answer.
I think I asked that.
Yeah. Well, we are over time, but so I don't know how your usual dismissal goes, or if I get to say. Oh, perfect. Yeah, of course. And we will stick around for a few minutes after you want to come up and ask us questions, please, by all means. And actually, I have a few cards. We'll leave a few cards up here if you want to ask questions by email anonymously. We'll do that too. If you're applying for jobs, though, remember all of the hints that we gave you.